for all y'all sticking around. I think everybody's about made their way into the Sharpening Young Minds. We will continue our study of church history. Now, what we've been looking at, again, is this pulling away from the idea of the first century church that we read about in the New Testament. Again, as we made note in our lesson, that the letters to the churches, we're looking at that because they were doing certain things that they shouldn't have been doing in various different locations, right? And then through these things we make the application to us today because the apostles had that authority, and we look at that and that's what we're following along with. So we're following the New Testament doctrine of the church. So through this, we find after the day of Pentecost that the church is established. We have the church mentioned now before in a futuristic tense. Now it's in the present or or the future, I guess, tense like that, about this of the church. But the idea there that it's a present thing, that the church has been established there on Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. So from this we begin to pull away, and that's what we've been looking at, is that there are faithful Christians that are following, just as we have today, following the New Testament example, following the letters, and we went through the idea of how they determined what were inspired letters, what were uninspired, and they're looking at these inspired letters, the ones in the canon, and they're following them, and they're not accepting anything else. But we have a group of individuals that are beginning to pull away from that. So just like we have today, there are unfaithful churches. Even though they have the Church of Christ on the sign in the front yard, they are not faithful. They're not following exactly what Christ has authorized in the Bible. So what we're going to be looking at today is a farther of pulling away and the growth of the episcopacy. That's easy for me to say. But what we're looking at is this growth of these bishop of bishops, in another way to say that. So what we're going to be looking at is how they are growing even more and even more. So when the bishops were called to Nicaea, we talked about that last Sunday, they were equal. So what Constantine has done in AD 325, he's called a council together. He says, all right, all you bishops that are overseeing your churches in the area, we went through great length in this, how they began to set a man up over the elders, and they made the distinction between the bishops and the elders. And I said, all right, well, the elders are, the group, but we have a bishop, this one man, he's kind of the safeguard. He's going to make sure, and he's kind of the final say on things, and we're going to look to him, kind of elevate him a little higher than the elders. So we have the bishop. So Constantine, he's going to say, all right, everybody meet at Nicaea in AD 325. So when they met there at that council, all of these men, though not scriptural, all of these men were equals. There wasn't one over the other. This is important. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about this urge for one man to have power. Now, when we get into that, it's easy to think when you have a man or a woman, but in this case a man, that is over individuals. And he's kind of used to getting his way. And he's kind of used to, I don't know, Kalani there, she must be hunting up something. Anyway, when you go through and you think, well, this man is used to getting his way, right? He's used to having his way in certain things. And when you get him around other people, it's all right. Yeah, all right, she got what she needs there, I guess. But anyway, when you get this man, he's used to having his way, right? He's in a meeting, and if he says no, then everybody else around him says no. And he's used to having that way in his meetings. Now he comes to another meeting with other individuals, and guess what? There's going to be one man, and he's going to be kind of flexing his muscles in a way, and he wants to be the head man of that group. So it's not long before they begin to think, all right, this man, I'm used to getting my way, I want to have my way overall. So when they met in Nicaea, they were all equals. But these positions came about from a specific person being in charge at every meeting, thus having authority. So they did that with the elders. One man's kind of the chairman. Well, now we have a group of individuals, and we need one man to be that chairman over all of this. So again, we're building up that mindset. So soon this authority spanned over the elders of the congregation, and eventually the city bishops began extending their control even to the country churches, thus establishing their authority. And at this time, the Bishop of Rome had no position of power above the other bishops. So this is important. The Bishop of Rome had power in his district, if you will, as the same as any other bishop that was around that area. That these individuals, again, you have these big city churches, and they're beginning to have rule over these districts. But we're going to find for some reason, and we're going to get into a few of those reasons, I guess, that the bishop at Rome began to kind of see this position is coming up, and he's going to be exalted a little bit above the others. Now, another meeting is called in 359, excuse me. And this is going to be from Constantius. He's going to be, this is Constantine's younger son, or son, not his younger son, but just his son. And he's going to continue in this and call the bishops together to settle disagreements. Now, this is not biblical. We understand, again, that the elders control the events that are happening here at Murray City, that we're autonomous. It doesn't matter what the other congregations in Crockett County are doing. We don't have to have a big meeting of the elders or representatives from the churches in Crockett County to discuss anything. We just control the elders that we have here to control the events that are happening in our congregation. But they begin to keep seeing this trend, say, well, we'll just get everybody together and see what everybody else has. And on the surface, it thinks, well, that's a good idea, but it's not biblical, so it's a very bad thing in which they're doing. Now, they called another meeting together, again, 359 in the West, to discuss the doctrine of Arius. Now, you may not remember that exactly from last week, but Arius had argued about the nature of Christ. Now, remember, this is what they began to have their differences in, because when church became legal, if you will, the little minute things that they were not fighting over when you were facing persecution began to arise. So this man named Arius, he was arguing against the nature of Christ, saying that he was above men but below God. Well, people didn't agree with this, so they began to talk about these. So after this, the synod, or this group of men, that's what it'll be calling, condemned Arius. So they said, hey, listen, we don't like your doctrine. We don't want to talk about this anymore. And they label him as a false teacher. But at this meeting in 359, they're going to bring back in and discuss Arius and discuss his things. And the Bishop of Rome saw this as a way in which that they could reinstate Arius. And the Bishop of Rome did not like this. Now, he didn't have any authority to like it or not. And that's what we're trying to get at with this. He didn't like it, but it didn't matter if he liked it or not. So he was displeased with the idea of reinstating this Arianism, right? This belief in which he was following to, that over the nature of Christ. So at this end, he called 90 bishops together in Rome and made opposition to Arianism. So here we have the bishop in Rome. He says, I don't like what you're doing. Now he calls 90 bishops together, and he said, all right, let's get together and we're going to oppose this Arianism. Now, he calls them together, and history shows that the Bishop of Rome had nothing to do with the First Council of Nicaea, interestingly enough. Let me back up one here. That he did not have anything to do with the First Council, so they didn't include the Bishop of Rome. So he wasn't called to that. So they're discussing this, so he's kind of got his feelings hurt, I guess, in a way, if you want to say that. So including the Bishop of Rome, no less than 10 others did not attend the council. So he got feeling left out. Again, I'm a prominent man in my congregation, people do what I say to do because I'm the bishop. So now he's finding himself saying, well, I don't like it. So he's getting a following of other individuals that are going to be following after him. Now, even into the 4th century, the church was not centralized, or not in centralized control. So that means that even through the 4th century, there's bishops controlling different districts. They don't have a full role of control over these areas, though they're gaining that every year. So the Bishop of Rome began to claim authority outside his diocese or district around 359. So we're looking at this moving again from the 1st century church all the way now we're at 359, and the Bishop of Rome is finding himself in a more of a power role than the other bishops. Now, he even condemned the Synod of Rimini because they assembled without the sanction of the Bishop of Rome, whose opinion ought to have been consulted before that of any other bishop. Now, think of the arrogancy of this man. Here he is, and again, keep in mind, this man is used to getting his way, right? He's the top dog, and he's used to getting his way, and they are going to make these synods or these gatherings together, and he says, wait a minute, you didn't even ask me if I thought this was okay. And this is the mindset of this bishop in Rome. So he's just kind of got this mentality about himself. Now, we're getting into that, and it's going to build up even more. Now, even with these wishes, right, that he said that they needed to be consulted before they were able to do any of these things, even with this, the Bishop of Rome had no authority to say this. So he doesn't have any authority at this time, presently, The bishop of Rome is just like the bishop of Alexandria or Mesopotamia. Now, they're all the same, right? They're all equal. But he's beginning to grow this power. He's pulling these other bishops to him on his side, and he's beginning to gain control. So the bishop at Rome had no authority, but the churches in the West soon began to exalt him. Now, I'm going to quickly jump to a slide, and we'll jump backwards here. So we're talking about the ones in the West. So again, you might remember this chart from last week when we were discussing this, that Rome, right, over there in Italy, these people are going to be kind of being loyal to this individual at Rome. So Rome had this certain appeal about it, and we're going to go through that here in just a moment. But Rome had this certain appeal, and they said, well, we're going to kind of stand behind this at Rome. So we remember Constantine goes and builds Constantinople, and he actually wants to move the capital of Rome over here, or the capital of Italy, Rome. He's going to move it over and make it Constantinople. But they don't want to go with that. So you have a division between these empires. So let's go back to this. So they began, the ones in the West, so when I say those in the West, that area there, they began to kind of exalt him to be a little bit higher than what he really is. Now even with, let's see, all right, they would even give him the name Pope or Papa and make him the church's universal head. So here's where we have the first Pope, this name, or Father is essentially what that's meaning in Latin. That we're going to make this one man, he's the father, right, of all this. So we call him Papa or the Pope. So that's where the name comes from. So now we have this church at Rome. Again, there's other congregations, but this bishop at Rome has exalted himself, and he's gotten all these other people kind of helping him and getting on his side, and he's exalting himself up. Now, there were 5 metropolitans in this time. There's Rome, there's Alexandria, there's Antioch, Constantinople, and Jerusalem. So these are the big cities of the area, big cities of the time. So Rome seemed to be just the superpower of the West. Rome, that great capital, right? The Roman Empire, right here in Rome. So they've exalted themselves up a little bit more. So we have Constantinople being the power of the East. So they have a lot of influence as well. Constantine, he's over there, and they're building this up, and they're building these 2 seemingly empires at this time. Now, the Council of Chaldicon decreed that they were equal, but a conflict arose as to who would be the dominant power. So, okay, here we go again. You've got a man over in, let me move the slide. You've got a man over in Rome, and he's going to be the father, right? The Papa, the Pope. He's this man. He's in charge. We're going to exalt him as if he says it's okay, then it's okay. We're exalting him like this. But now we have a man over here in Constantinople, right? And this bishop over here, we kind of, all the people in the East, they kind of exalt him as the same way. So you have these 2 men, and again, you got to find out who the big bull of the woods is eventually, and that's what we're going to find. So through that, again, when we look at this battle of the bishops, that's what we're going to be looking at next. The idea of this battle, right? You've got all these superpowers essentially in each area. Now we're going to have this battle of the bishops. Who's going to be victorious? All these men are used to getting their way. Who's going to be the final one? So again, when there first began to be a distinction between elders and bishops, they were headed for a universal head of the church. You just can't keep putting one man in position and eventually it's stopping. He's going to be until he's got the full top position, right? Some men are just made that way. They're just going to look for that continual, nobody's going to tell me I'm going to be the highest power. So when they held the Council of Nicaea, there began to be similarities between the church's organization and Constantine's Roman government. That's important. Again, when you look at that, you can even compare that, get online and look at these things, look at the layout of the Catholic Church and look at the layout of the Roman Empire, and they're set up very similar. So they're like, all right, we're going to hold these councils. How are we going to perform all these parliamentary procedures? We're just going to do it kind of like we're doing it here in Rome with the government, with the empire. So again, you have the Pope, the Papa, he's up at the top like the emperor. So again, and it blends into this very well. Now, there was a development in church positions equal to lower offices in the imperial administration. So again, you're setting up this way in which it's set up. You've got the top man, it goes down a little lower, so we have like priests, or the Pope, bishops, priests, cardinals, all those men are set in there just like that. So with this, it was only natural for the growth of these offices to reach that someone had to be equal with the emperor deciding for the church. So if the emperor is going to make the decisions for the state. We're set up just like this. Now we need someone like that in these councils. So Rome and Constantinople were supposedly on equal field, but more favored Rome as the supreme power. So Rome's got that going for them. They seem like they're going to be the headquarters for the church. So different factors cause the eyes to be upon Rome. Now here's our list as the central headquarters. The prestige of Rome was tremendous at that time. So again, Rome is the empire, is the emperor. He's there in Rome. He's God on earth, right? That's what they're going to get to. Talking about he has that power and they're going to worship him. So they're this centralized location. This is it, right? This is Rome. Now, Rome was also the capital city of the world. So the Roman Empire of the known world were ruling all of this. Where's the capital? Rome. So the church in Rome was well known for its benevolence and sound doctrine, interestingly enough. And a strong tradition, catch it, that Peter and Paul had founded the church in Rome helped their case, even though it was only a tradition. So we talked about that several weeks ago. Why do you need Peter to be the first pope? Because in Matthew 16, 18, and 19, he's given the keys to the kingdom. So if I want my pope on earth to have the keys to the kingdom, that what he says goes, I need Peter to be that man. But no tradition even holds that Peter was there. But it says that Peter and Paul founded the church. It's apostolic, right? We have this heritage. Look at us. And the church at Rome was also very active in missionary work in Western Europe, causing many to look at that church. So they begin to look at this church and they begin to say, okay, well, here's the guy that we need, right? This is the one that's going to be elevated. And before long, you have this man, Pope Leo I. He's going to be the bishop in 440. It took a little bit, all that time to get there. 440 AD, we have this man. He is going to be there. So with prominent personalities in Rome, it did not take long for there to be an elevation of the bishop. Men like Leo I, who we have pictured behind us, later called the Great, or Leo the Great, who became bishop in Rome in 440, would press the importance of having more authority. Again, I'm used to getting my way. I'm the church, I'm the pope here in Rome, and Rome is the superpower. Rome's the leader in the world today. And if I'm doing that, then I have more authority than anybody else. So he would even teach, now note this, that the Lord held the bishops at Rome responsible for the care of the churches. Now that's arrogancy, right? And that's false. But he looked at himself, well, I'm the bishop, right? I'm going to be taking care of the church, and what I say goes. So he also taught that other bishops were assisted to the Roman bishop, but not equal in authority. Listen to that. So what he's going to begin to teach is saying, all you other bishops, right, these representatives from other congregations, you assist me, the Roman bishop, because I'm the supreme one, and you're not equal to me, right? You're a little lower. I'll listen to you, but ultimately I'm the one that says yea or nay. So, we find Leo I. He's the first pope. He's going to be the first one. Looking back, the development of the pope was a gradual process. So again, we've taken that and now we have it, right? We've got to where we're trying to get to. The church, led by elders, a plurality of elders in the first century. They're autonomous. This is how they're going to be following. They're going to follow the Bible. What the Bible says, they're going to teach that and practice these things. They're going to have the apostles' doctrine of that, and they're going to have the oversight of the elders, just like we have today. What we have is this church breaking off. Again, not a faithful church, but we don't have any real divisions at this time. These are still churches. We don't have like what we might think about as denominations today. We won't see that until the Catholic Church, which is going to be coming about. Catholic meaning universal. And what we're going to have with Rome here is that when they begin to grow exceedingly stronger and people are uneducated in the Bible, then we have, again, as I've mentioned several times, Martin Luther comes in and we have the Reformation. So they're trying to reform the church. And again, they kind of swing the pendulum in the other direction, unfortunately. But what we have here, again, this is still, if you went back in that time and you were talking about the church, there would be the one church, but it's not the church that we have today. So that's important as we look at that there are faithful churches, and then we have these churches that are following again, and they're not really called anything yet. So I keep mentioning like the Catholic Church, and that's what we're getting to, but they're not referred to that at this time. They're just simply the church there. But again, they're unfaithful. They're not following it in the way which God had commanded them. So, there's no apostolic father approved of this. When we have the writings of all these men, none of them approve of this. This is not what is intended. We might recall the apologists, these people that were writing to defend Christianity. they had talked about these things, that they did not have any authority to do these things. So when one reads the New Testament, no organization like this exists in the first century, and that's important, friends. So when we go back and think, well, what's wrong with all this? There's no authority in the Scriptures for this type of organization. It's pretty cut and dry. So what we're having is this pulling away, and we're going to continue through this, and we're going to continue this idea of the church growing, the bishop growing in power, and it's great. It's great to go back in this stuff with history, because what we're going to find again is people are not educated in the way things, and they're going to have it written in Latin, and not a lot of people can read Latin, and then they're going to be able to get away with seemingly anything they want. And again, if you go against the church, we're going to excommunicate you. And the church has so much power in that area, this bishop rolling over this, that it's pretty much, if you didn't agree with him, you didn't have much of a chance after that. So what we're going to find is a progression continuing on to that. And then finally, you're going to have the straw that breaks the camel back. Martin Luther, he's like, listen, this isn't right. They're going to get the Bible translated. They're going to read these things and expose these men for what they are. So hope to encourage you to continue on with this. Are there any questions or comments about this idea of the first pope and who we've got? Now again, if you search that and say who's the first pope, they will say Peter. But in fact, it's really this Pope Leo I. He's the first man that sets him up as this exalted bishop. But again, you have to bring it back to Peter because he's got the authority. But if you search that, that's what they'll tell you. But history says it was Pope Leo I. Any questions or comments about that? Okay, that was it. We got a minute.